I just want to take a few moments today we opened this series on the Sermon on the Mount. And I want to go backwards before we go forward. I'm going to go backwards. Last week, Pastor Terry shared the idea of what it means to be salt and light. The week before that, Pastor Melinda opened up our time with the Beatitudes. She did an amazing job. It was just... So I went back and listened to these sermons, and initially this was going to be kind of a 3-week series, but the Lord said, man, I think you need to stretch this out just a little bit. So we're gonna wring this thing out for the next 3 to 4 weeks as we unpack what I believe is the greatest sermon ever preached. And I've listened to tons of sermons, Oswald Chambers and Bishop Jakes, and people that I admire in the faith that I grew up on, listened, Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, Dutch Sheets. These are people that they've been in my ear for the past 20 to 25 years as I would glean from these amazing leaders. But if you want to talk about the greatest sermon ever recorded in history, it's the Sermon on the Mount. What makes it so great is that Jesus preached it himself. He preached it himself. But this is not just any sermon. It's a message that transformed lives from centuries, but it continues to speak to the chaos of our world. And if we pay close attention, we can see how Jesus is so acutely aware of the things that are going on that he speaks to the chaos of our world, not just in his day. But the beauty of this sermon is that it is timeless. It never goes out of style. So I want to take a step back and I want to look at it from the lens of the crowd. Jesus gives the message, but then there are people that are in the crowd. How are they perceiving these articulate words of Jesus? And these people have struggles of their own, problems of their own. And it reminded me of every Sunday in the American church. The people gather every week, not asking, Lord, I'm coming to see you, but I'm coming because what do you have to give to me? And yes, we have issues in our lives and things that we need to address in the culture, in the world, in our families. So this message isn't out of the box for the crowd. They came because they were searching for something, just like us. We come because we need a word from the Lord. We come because the culture is wicked. We have issues with our government, issues with school. And I want to come to church because I know you're going to speak on these things. But the way that Jesus handled the crowd was masterful. We'll look at today the Sermon on the Mount based on the crowd. So let me paint a picture. And I would love for you to use your imagination just for the next few moments. Just everyone close your eyes as we paint this picture. It was a quiet morning on the Galilean hillside. The sun cast its golden across the landscape, shimmering on the Sea of Galilee. Below, there was a gentle breeze. There were murmurs from the crowd expecting Jesus to speak to their specific issues. There were fishermen, farmers, mothers, fathers, those married, those single, those that were sick, those that were curious, all gathered to come hear this man called Jesus. They heard rumors about him, that that he was a miracle worker, a healer, a teacher. But today, his words would do something that no miracle could ever do. Open your eyes for a moment. Paint the landscape. Here Jesus is in Matthew, recorded in Matthew chapter 5. He goes up to a mountain. He draws in the crowd, not just his disciples, to come and to hear his words. John the Baptist came preaching repentance. Jesus came preaching and teaching the kingdom. But Jesus does something very unique, but it wasn't out of the ordinary. Jesus takes a seat. You see, in the custom, the rabbis would sit when they teach. So it wasn't out of the ordinary for Jesus to take a seat while he's talking to the crowd, to his disciples. So Jesus does what is a part of his custom. He is a rabbi, he is a teacher, the greatest teacher known to mankind. And Jesus takes a seat. What he would tell them was very astounding. Jesus would reveal the very heart of God and the radical life of the kingdom. They came with questions. Jesus would reveal the heart of God and how to live radically in his kingdom. I love what Pastor Melinda said 2 weeks ago. She says it was not just statements of blessing, but in his sermon, Jesus established a new standard, a divine blueprint for living. And as he opened his mouth, his voice clear yet gentle, he commands the attention of those that are leaning in to hear the words of Jesus. So the crowd leans in, captivated yet confused. Because like I said, they came with an agenda. They wanted him to speak to their specific social issues. They heard about Jesus. They knew he was a great teacher. They said, I am sure that when I go see Jesus, he's going to speak about the culture. He's going to speak about the things that are going on in Rome. But he didn't. This was no ordinary message. This was upside down wisdom, where humility is exalted, where mercy triumphs over judgment, and love conquers. It was different to them. They weren't expecting to hear these words from Jesus. Better yet, it was an invitation to a new way of life. Jesus would offer an invitation to this new way of life. So imagine those words echoing through history, reaching us in today's fast-paced society, where people are just longing for something. Everyone is. It's more than just endless striving where we're doing things to get things. How about striving for comparison? Don't we hunger for a way of life that brings true peace, joy, and purpose? The Sermon on the Mount is as relevant today than it was back then. And this is what I want us to see today. I believe it offers three things, this Sermon on the Mount. Guidance. Jesus' words to the crowd will offer hope. Jesus' words to the crowd will offer vision for life as God intended it to be. So gathered on this hillside, all of their eyes were now fixed on Jesus to hear what he has to say. And their hearts were hungry for truth. Their souls longed for something more. Let's revisit who's in the crowd. There's the farmers whose hands fill with calluses because they've been working. The average working American who works 9 to 5, they do construction. They're tired day in and day out, but yet they found time to come and see Jesus. There was the fisherman who had rinsed his smells of the sea. They smelt like the very thing that they have been through. But yet they were there to see Jesus. How about the widows? Clutching their shawls, carrying the weight of survival. I just want to make it. I'm not sure how I'm going to get my next meal, but I got to go hear Jesus. Jesus is speaking. Let me go hear what Jesus has to say. How about those that are oppressed? Oppressed by Roman government. Power reigning over their lives. Embracing the injustices of the world. Yet they were there to hear Jesus. And then you have those just longing to see a Messiah, thinking that he would come and overthrow the government. All of these individuals would gather at this mountain to hear the words of Jesus. Doesn't this sound like our churches today? People who work 9 to 5 jobs, we work hard, we need a break. Widows, those who are just marginalized and cast aside. Those of us who smell like the very thing we have been through. Those who are oppressed. We see the things that are going on in our country, in our world, and yet we come looking for Jesus to give us answers. But what Jesus says out of his mouth first is astounding. He opens up his mouth, and the first phrase that he gives those that are longing for something, he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom." He knows about Rome. He knows about the oppression. He knows what you need of. But the first thing out of the man's mouth, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs." When you are poor in spirit, you get access to the King. But it wasn't what they were looking for. The widow didn't want to hear about being poor in spirit. Those that were being oppressed by the Roman government didn't want to hear about being poor in spirit. Those who work 9 to 5 jobs, they didn't want to hear about being poor in spirit. But Jesus said, in order for the kingdom to come, you must be poor in spirit. His words would resound throughout the crowd. And he didn't give space to elaborate on what he was saying. He just said this: you are blessed when you understand you need God. I will tell you, church, today, the reason why we are not enjoying the blessedness of God is because we think we don't need him. You can tell based on how we live our lives, the decisions we make, the jobs we take. You think you got that on your own. was God. It's always been God. It will continue to be God. So Jesus opens his mouth and he says, blessed are those who understand the beauty of humility. That I can't do nothing without God. The air that I breathe comes from God. I need God to wake up, to move. I need God. I consult God with everything. He says, when you do that, guess what happens? You have access to the kingdom. In a world that celebrates man, and God forgive us. In a world that celebrates self-confidence, celebrates success and independence, what could possibly be blessed about spiritual poverty? Where you empty yourself of everything. Say, God, I can't do a daggone thing without you. All that I have comes from you. You're my source for everything. I am nothing. That I am nothing without God. And sure, you may look like you're successful. You are not. You look like you got things going. You don't. God is not impressed with your job, your degree, how much money you have. He says, blessed are those who understand you can't do nothing without me. When you get to that point, he says you will have access to the kingdom. Jesus wasn't speaking of weakness. And don't get it twisted. Just because you live and flow and operate in humility does not make you weak. And don't misunderstand meekness for lack of strength. When you're meek, you know how to tame your urges. You know how to be under control. So don't misunderstand what Jesus is saying. He wasn't speaking of weakness, but he was speaking of humility. The kind of humility that acknowledges our deep need for God. I'm reminded of these verses in John's gospel. In John chapter 5, verse 19, Jesus explained, I tell you the truth, meaning I'm not lying. He says the Son can do nothing by himself. He does only what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son does also. Let's read it again. Jesus explained, I'm telling the truth, bruh. The Son, speaking of himself, he can do nothing by himself. Interesting. He is fully God and fully man. All power and authority is in Jesus' hand. But Jesus himself said, I can do nothing on my own. I need God. But you are God. You don't understand. I need God. I only do what I see. I stay so close to God that I only do what I hear him telling me to do. How would you like to be that close to him? That the echo of our heart is I only do what I see and what I hear from my Father because my dependency is upon the Holy Ghost. John 14:10. He says, do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own. It is the Father dwelling in me, performing his works. That every work that Jesus did, he did dependent on the Father. And this is Jesus we're talking about. The King of Glory, the blameless Lamb. We sing songs about him. But Jesus not only taught this idea of humility, of dependency on God. He says, y'all, I'm doing it myself. Why can't you see that if I'm gonna be your rabbi, if I'm gonna be your teacher, if I'm gonna be your Lord, just do what you see me doing. I'm not asking you to do anything outside of what you see me doing. And in the culture that we live, everything is independent outside of God. It got me thinking about family the other day. How many people have children? Okay. How many people have ever been a child? I thought about this the other day. I remember being 13, 14, 15 years old and longing for independence. I couldn't wait to get out of the house. And can I say this word in church? And we're just stupid. We think we know it all. The experiences. So at 15, I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna get me a good paying job. And we say stupid stuff like making $26,000 a year. I'm gonna buy me a car, buy me a nice house. With what money? Because we are programmed to think about independence. We teach our children when you get to a certain age, you gotta be independent. You gotta do it on your own. Where did God ever say that? God never said that. So I see some of the kids like, yes, I ain't going nowhere. I'm staying right here. Now, I will tell you, at some point. But the beauty of what we have taught our children, get independent, get your own. That's anti-Bible. The Bible teaches interdependence. Interdependence. It never wants us to live outside of the covering of God. It's a covering that God provides. So we live our entire lives getting to the point where we can be independent. Man, I wish I could go back to being 12. I'll never forget I got a job, man. I was working at Sears. I love working at Sears, man. I was selling lawnmowers. You couldn't tell me that I wasn't dope. And back in those times, I'm talking like it's in the Bible times, back in those times, we used to, as guys in my space, you would wear your shirts one size smaller to give the illusion that you were bigger than what you really were. So they gave us these red polo shirts that had Craftsman on the front of it. They said, what size are you? I said, I'm a large, but get me a medium. And then you pull the shirt up on your gun, so you pull it up so it's nice and tight on your arms. Then you walk like you got something stuck in your butt. You be like, you get them with the, you just walk like that so you look big. I got my first paycheck because I knew it was a commission job. So we did like a base salary. It's like $4 an hour base salary. And then you got commission on the tractors that you sold. And for 2 weeks, I was crushing it, man. Lord forgive me, I was so attracted to this lady. She lived in Philadelphia. Her yard had to be like 8 by 8. But I was telling her, like, how cool would you look just on the tractor? You like, you. And she bought a $1,300 tractor. And I got, I think, like 8% commission. I said, man, I'm killing it. And I would keep my own tally of the things that I sold because I knew how much money I was getting. When I got paid, my wife and I were dating, I remember calling, who's FICA? Why they taking my money? Adulting ain't easy. You got a mortgage, gotta pay taxes at the end of the year. They want their money first. They don't give you an option to pay it later. They just take it. Man, I would do anything to go back to being 11. No care in the world. Just get up and wash your face and do what you need to do. Go play in the playground. But yet we work so hard to be independent. And the mindset creeps into the church where we want to be independent from God. God, I don't need you to do this. God, I already know how to do this. I can take this on my own. But Jesus said, in order for you to access the kingdom, you must have humility. You must declare your need for God. Jesus reminds us that true blessing begins where striving ends. True blessing begins when you stop working, where you stop trying to figure it out. It's the moment when life is stripped away, where the illusion of control is gone, when you lost that job, the relationship ended, where the dream crumbled right in front of your face. It's in those moments where we say, God, you've always been there, and I need you. Jesus would teach his disciples in the crowd, before he talks about marriage, before he talks about adultery, before he talks about prayer and fasting, he said, none of this will make sense to you if you can't declare your dependency upon God. And it's a beautiful text, man. I love beautiful text. He says, but I can't move past this if you don't understand this one part. Blessed are those who understand I need God. The other thing I want to make mention of, and we'll close up, is he says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The blessing is not an invitation to wallow in grief, but a promise of God's presence in our deepest pain. Jesus acknowledges that mourning is a part of the human experience, whether for a loved one, an opportunity of loss, or the brokenness of the world. Yet he assures the crowd that God does not abandon us in our sorrow. Instead, he draws near, offering comfort that transcends our words. Jesus' sermon also includes those who grieve the world's injustices, not just grief from loss. Jesus says, I feel your pain, but I'm here with you. The comfort of knowing that Jesus feels our pain, that even in our discomfort, even in our sorrow, even in our grief, Jesus is not absent in those moments, but we have to recognize that he's God and that he's there. He says, and if you'll let me, I will come and sit with you in your grief. I've been challenged with that. I've been challenged with processing grief, whether it be a loss of a loved one or the loss of what I see in the world. And ideally, we ask the question, well, where is God? That is the natural response of the human experience. Where's God? God, but where were you? I'll never forget reading in Habakkuk. And here's the thing that we misunderstand. God can handle your questions. Let me say it again. God is big enough to handle your questions. I'll never forget growing up in this church context. We were told, you don't question God. He's omnipresent, he's omniscient. He does what he wants, when he wants to. And that's it. So we live in bondage. And we think everything that happens, we can't ask God why. We can't ask God, I don't understand this. But Jesus gave me so much hope. Here Jesus is on the cross. He said, God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you? So the question isn't you not asking God the question. I want to ask you, when you ask God the question, do you give him space to talk or do you monopolize the conversation? It's one thing to ask God why and then continue to complain and complain and complain. There's another thing to say, God, why is this happening? Let me give you space because you're God and I'm not. And if I go back to the gospel, according to Matthew, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. That even in grief and in hurt, God says, if you will let me, I will be there with you. If you will just let me, I will be there with you. I will give you perspective. You may not understand it now, but you will later. But right now, if you are grieving loss, if you are grieving the things that are going on in the world, let me be there with you. So Jesus understands our grief. Jesus calls that morning blessed. For it aligns your heart with his heart. He says, blessed are those who mourn, because now your hearts are aligned. You feel what I feel. Can you imagine being God? Sending your son to die for people who would reject you. Think about this. You're God. You send Jesus into the world to die for people who would reject you time and time and time and time again. They would curse you on Monday and worship you on Sunday. Talk about you all throughout the week, but then Sunday morning, bless the Lord, oh my soul. I lift up my hands and worship Jesus. They speak in tongues on Sunday. Monday, they're cursing at their wives and husbands. Do you think that grieves God? Is God in mourning? Does God feel? But he says, blessed are those who mourn, because when you do, our hearts are now connected. I couldn't be God, man. I just couldn't. Because the way my creative brain works, I I was thinking, who is that in the Bible? John the Baptist's father. When he became mute, he said, you don't want to believe me? I'm going to make you not talk. I would do stuff like that all the time. I'd be like, 1 minute you say you for me? Oh, you don't believe me? Watch this. You like, you can't talk. Oh, you don't appreciate your job? You keep complaining about your job? Okay. You don't have one no more. That's why I'm not God. So I believe that before we can really dive into this Sermon on the Mount, let's lean into the words of Jesus. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for to them they have access to the kingdom. Jesus would reveal, in closing, Jesus would reveal the very heart of God and the radical life of his kingdom. This is the beauty of the Sermon on the Mount. It's a new way of thinking, a new way to live. Next couple of weeks we'll unpack verses Matthew 5, 6, and 7. But I want us to make sure we have the lens that we can't do any of this until we acknowledge our dependency on God. Does that make sense? Come on, let's give God a shout of praise today. I'm going to do this, and I know we're going to recognize our new members today. Excited. About three weeks ago, let's just pause in the back, guys, for a minute. Let's pause in the back for a minute, guys. About 3.5, maybe 4 weeks ago, I got a phone call from one of our sisters here in the church, and shared with what the doctors were diagnosing. And I said, hey, do you mind if we pray for you on Sunday? And she said, first she was like, you're not going to embarrass me, right? I was like, no, I'm going to just pray, But she said yes, that we can pray for her Sunday morning. I text Pastor Mike in the morning. I said, hey, we're going to pray for someone in the morning. And she stood right here, and we prayed. I put my microphone down, and I said, y'all don't need to know what you're praying about. Just you pray, you stretch your hand, and you believe. Just to honor, details that were going on in her body and things. And she had a biopsy done based on some things that were going on in her body, and she said she's waiting for results. I said, in the meantime, we're going to attach our faith, and we'll stand on what the Word of God says. I will never stop contending for the power of God to move in the lives of God's people. So she stood here and we prayed, and she went back to her seat. And it was on a Thursday. The next Thursday, I was out doing ministry at the bowling alley, my other church. And I think Susan called me first, and then she texted me. I stopped bowling because I saw the text message. I was up, I was here. I'm gonna show you what I was doing. It's like, Ernest, your turn. I said, great. I grabbed my ball, and I'm like, I'm in it. I'm ready to go. I'm bouncing, and I look at my phone, and I said, oh wait, let me put the ball down. And I ran to the corner because the text message said, doctors did the biopsy, And out of their mouths, they said, we are confused. Let me say that again. The medical professional who took the biopsy because they thought they saw cancer. She went back to the doctor. They said, we are confused. The thing that we saw, it's not there no more. You can't tell me my God is not a healer. You can't tell me that God is not good.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Pastor Ernest. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our YouTube channel. Hey, before you click off, make sure you like and subscribe so you continue to updates on when we go live. It's our prayer that when you hear the gospel message, that it does something to the heart of man, that it changes the trajectory of our lives, that we listen to the word, we hear the word, but also we respond to the gospel. My prayer for you is that you will respond to the gospel message, that it causes you to do something differently and to live differently. I want to leave you with this prayer. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May his face shine upon you. Be gracious unto you, and may you at all times live in uncommon peace. We can't wait to connect with you soon, but until then, we'll see you next week. Peace.